Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Helena Blavatsky. We are on the Secret Doctrine. We will be reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can understand why I say the things that I do. A particular note again today is almost certainly going to be the Infinite Integrations playlist, where I talk about myself working magic and how I came to do so. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of the Secret Doctrine with Chapter 1. Now, there are, the way this is set up, they have these 7 stanzas right here, right? But I'm going to skip this part, and we're going directly into the explanation for the stanzas, because it does include the stanzas in their entirety in the explanation, and there's no reason to make the short video if we're going to be dealing with it again here anyway. So let us dive in and start with stanza 1. The eternal parent, space, wrapped in her ever invisible robes, had slumbered once again for 7 eternities. The parent space is the eternal, ever-present cause of all, the incomprehensible deity, whose invisible robes are the mystic root of all matter and of the universe. Space is the one eternal thing that we can most easily imagine, immovable in its abstraction and uninfluenced by either the presence or absence of it, in it, of an objective universe. It is without dimension in every sense and self-existent. Spirit is the first differentiation from that, and the causeless cause of both spirit and matter. It is, as taught in the Esoteric Catechism, neither limitless void nor conditioned fullness, but both. It was and ever will be. See Proem, which we did yesterday. Thus, the robes stand for the noumenon of undifferentiated cosmic matter. It is not matter as we know it, but the spiritual essence of matter. It is the co-eternal and even one with space in its abstract sense. Root nature is also the source of the subtle, invisible properties, invisible matter. It is the soul, so to say, of the one infinite spirit. The Hindus call it Mula Prakriti and say that it is the primordial substance, which is the basis of the upadhi, or vehicle of every phenomenon, whether physical, mental, or psychic. It is the source from which Akasa radiates. Now, I hold this to be the Holy Spirit, right? That is my terminology for the electromagnetics that are held in place. Now, this was really the beginning of the exploration of magnetics in general, right? We had electricity. It was still relatively new, and it was not in widespread use everywhere as of yet. It did not lead, as of yet, at the time of the writing of this book, to the various wonders that we have today. Their explanation of space as being the creator in mind is the same, though. I do believe that God is, right? If you were unaware, if you have not gone through the various playlists, and that is understandable, not everybody watches every video. So I believe in the Trinity being the body, the 5D temple that you navigate 5D space in, the soul, which is the individualized piece of divinity that makes the decisions for the temple, and the Holy Spirit. Now, the Holy Spirit is everything. It makes up the body and possibly the spirit. I'm not sure on the mechanics on that one, but it definitely makes up your body. It is literally every atom in existence. It is the electromagnetic charges of every atom in existence, and it is all the space both within the atom and between the atoms. It is at the same time all physical matter and all of the emptiness between the physical matter. The best identifier for it is going to be plasma, because there are two types of plasma. If you're unaware, there's activated plasma and there's unactivated plasma. What science calls dark matter and things of that nature are actually inactivated plasma. Now, this is not pulled entirely from me. This is an extrapolation that I have made from the various scientific points that are brought to light by the Thunderbolts Project and the Electric Universe. Now, whether that model is completely correct is not completely relevant to me. There is threads between every heavenly body. Between us and the sun, there is a thread. Between the sun and Jupiter, there is a thread. It is an electromagnetic influence that happens between those two bodies. It is the same between us and the moon and between us and Jupiter. There is an electromagnetic thread between there. I believe what happens is that the electromagnetic thread from the sun is a power source. And while we may not see that power coming in directly, it is still happening. You can see the effects through the various earthquakes and hurricanes and storms that are just like, where do they come from? It is because of electromagnetic influence. The sun has an awful lot to do with our well-being here on this planet. It is diffused. The energy coming from the sun is diffused through our atmosphere into visible light. And that is what powers all of our plants and even us, right? You get vitamin D from the sun. So that connection to me is real. But often that connection is invisible. The invisible part of it is the inactivated matter. Now, if you were to take a telescope, an extremely powerful one, let's take James Webb, for instance, and you stick it out into space and you look way off into the distance, you can see these tunnels that are formed between the stars and the different planetary bodies in different variations. Some of them you can see quite bright. Some of them are rather dull, but you can see them. Not every one you can see, but you can see several of them. That is the activated plasma. The light that we see coming from the sun, that is activated plasma. It is us seeing the energetic emanations from that. But there are energetic emanations even if you don't see them. I believe that the Holy Spirit is that plasma, both active and inactive. It is literally the goo that we walk through. The air that we breathe is a liquid. It fills your lungs and you discharge it from your lungs. And the only real differentiation between water and air is the viscosity. It is how much it is concentrated, right? Water is hydrogen and oxygen. So is the atmosphere, with other things mixed into both of them. The pressure levels that we have here, right, our oxygen at 32 millibars, that is held together by electromagnetics. It is a plasma function. We move through this plasma, and as we move through the plasma, we cause ripples. The same as if you were in water, right? If you were in water and you were swimming, you make waves. If you throw a rock into a pond, it makes waves. They go out. There's a whole theory behind that. We do the same thing in oxygen, right? The same thing in this visible, or not visible, in this not as viscous fluid that we breathe. When you move, it causes ripples. It causes permutations. When you meditate and you are intentionally moving the electricity, you do the same thing. It's like flipping a switch. You are causing eddies that happen. One of the easiest ways to make the eddy that will happen is to speak it, right? Use the amplification part that is the throat chakra. You take the energy in at the top, you focus it through your third eye into the direction you want it to go, and then you speak it into being, and then you shove it into your heart and you make it so. That is manifestation in part. There is more to it, right? You're pulling energy from the bottom and from the top, and you're mixing and blending them into the manifestation. But it is a direct ripple effect of the electromagnetic harmonics that are the Holy Spirit. So when they are talking about space, it is the exact same as me talking about the Holy Spirit. Now, I call it the Holy Spirit because I believe that it is literally the essence of God. You don't have to believe in God. I do, firmly and emphatically. God, the Creator, by himself with no mediation between me and God. I look directly to Source to do all of the things that I do. I think that covers everything we needed there. The Hindus call it Mula Prakriti and say it is the primordial substance, which is the basis of the upadi, or vehicle. Wait, did I do this whole? Let's just do the whole thing over again. Okay. Thus, the robes stand for the noumena of undifferentiated cosmic matter. It is not matter as we know it, but the spiritual essence of matter, and is co-eternal, and even one with space in its abstract sense. Root nature is also the source of the subtle, invisible properties in visible matter. It is the soul, so to say, of the one infinite spirit. The Hindus call it Mula Prakriti and say that it is the primordial substance, which is the basis of the upadi, or vehicle, of every phenomenon. Whether physical, mental, or psychic, it is the source from which akasa radiates. A. By the 7 eternities, eons, or periods are meant. The word eternity, as understood in Christian theology, has no meaning in the Asiatic ear, except in its application to the one existence, nor is the term sempiternity, the eternal only in futurity, anything better than a misnomer. And there's a footnote here. Let us drop down and see what it is. It is stated in Book 2, Chapter 8 of Vishnu Purana. By immortality is meant existence to the end of the kalpa, and Wilson, the translator, remarks in a footnote, this, according to the Vedas, is all that is to be understood of the immortality or eternity of the gods. They perish at the end of the universal dissolution, or pralaya, and esoteric philosophy says they perish not, but are reabsorbed. That is also something that I hold, right? I believe that the soul is eternal, that where did I drop it? Right there. Okay. So I believe that the soul is eternal. It was somewheres prior to being here, and it will be somewheres after we leave here. It is my understanding that while we are there prior to being here, we all agree to learn lessons from each other. I call them sacred contracts or soul contracts. That is not necessarily what other people mean by that, even if I have taken inspiration from some of them. It is... I have agreed to learn something from you, and you have agreed to learn something from me. It may be a simple lesson. It may be a complicated lesson. It may be a wonderful lesson. It may be a horrible lesson. But we have agreed to that. And when the soul is done here on the mortal 5D plane, we go back into God. We go back into the eternity where we were prior to being here. Now, I firmly believe that we are here for lessons, to learn and to grow and to understand what the divine God actually wants us to do. We don't have to comply with that. We have free will. We can choose to do opposite, right? But you are better off to choose to do it. But the eternal part, to me, is not even a question. You were somewheres prior, you will be somewheres after, and it is not going to be hell, regardless of how bad you are. I know some people seem to need the punishment in order to stay on the straight and narrow, but that is not the people that this particular study is going to be for. And so, understand, there is no eternal damnation. There is no eternal punishment. That is not an Old Testament concept at all in the slightest. That was an insertion into the New Testament by people who were forming a religion. You don't have to like that fact, but it is still a fact. The apostles were forming a religion. They did what they needed to do in order for that religion to be formed, whether it was truthful or not. Back to the text. Such words do not and cannot exist in philosophical metaphysics and were unknown till the advent of ecclesiastical Christianity. The 7 eternities meant are the 7 periods, or a period answering to its duration to the 7 periods of a Manvantara, and extending throughout a Mahakalpa, or the Great Age, 100 years of Brahma, making a total of 311 trillion, 40 billion years. each year of Brahma being composed of 360 days and the same number of nights of Brahma, reckoning by the Chandrayana, or lunar year, and a day of Brahma consisting of 4,320,000,000 of mortal years. Now, I'm going to take exception to this. I don't believe that this number is correct, for a variety of reasons, right? The cycle appears to be on a 6,000 year repeating pattern. If you were unfamiliar with that, see the 12,000 year disaster cycle. There is a hot cycle and then a cold cycle, right? A warm or a dry and a wet, however you want to look at it. 12,000 years ago, in my estimation, through the things that I have learned, there was a fire event. Great fiery swords came down and changed the topography of the planet in very, very real ways, raising mountains and submerging continents. And then 6,000 years after that, there was a wet event, which was the Great Flood, which is recorded by Noah or is stolen by Noah and recorded by several other nationalities. I don't know the correct phraseology that I'm trying to use there, but the Sumerians, for instance, seems to be exactly where Noah came from. And so I believe that this is a repeating pattern, and that 6,000 years from the flood, which is remarkably close to today, there will be another hot event. That would be the completion of a cycle to me. That is 12,000 years. Where they pull this 311 trillion from, I don't know. It seems to be an extrapolation of things that people have thought about, right? As opposed to things that are trackable and provable, which is the flood and the fire that I am talking about. There is significant evidence to suggest that both the fire and the flood that I am talking about have happened, and that even prior to those, there were other cycles of the same thing. And that may extend back 311 trillion years, but doesn't necessarily have to. This appears to be the same logic of a day is a year for the Lord, and a year 1,000 years, right? That is a thought exercise. That is something that may be true, but it is not something that we can prove to be true. The 311 trillion seems awfully excessive to me, especially in light of other cultures, right? We have the Hopi, for instance, who said that they came into this age from underneath because of the flood around 6,000 years ago. There are other cultures that hold the same type of things. Some of them built arks, some of them were led underground, but all of them are pretty conclusive that it was roughly 6,000 years ago. That puts it well on this side of the error mark, right? Now, this is an extrapolation. Granted, this is just a thought exercise, and that is fine. I do not know that we can factually base upon these numbers, whereas I do indeed factually base upon the 12,000 year disaster cycle because it is trackable. There are things that we can look at as indicators that it did happen and even when the time was. And so for me, the 12,000 year is going to be a much closer approximation than we would get from 311 trillion. Fully understanding that I could be wrong, right? I am basing what I go off of by trackable numbers, not just an extrapolation of a guess, which is what this appears to be. I could be wrong if there is evidence proving that I am wrong and that it is actually 312 trillion years or 311 trillion years. Drop it in the comments below and we will make a video about that, and I will correct myself publicly. That is kind of what I do. All right, back to the text. These eternities belong to the most secret calculations, in which, in order to arrive at a true total, every figure must be a 7 power, 7 to the power of x. X varying according to the nature of the cycle in the subjective or real world. And every figure or number relating to, or representing, all the different cycles from the greatest to the smallest, in the objective or unreal world, must necessarily be multiples of 7. And here's somewhere else that I am going to disagree. To me, it is not a multiple of 7. There will always be a multiple of 8. 7 is an acceptable number for a lot of things, but it always includes this next harmonic, right? The harmonic goes from C to C. It does not go from C to B. It is the beginning and the end are the same, but there are 8 steps. It will be a multiple of 8 for me. It will never be a multiple of 7. That is just how that is going to work unless I am proven to be wrong. If I am proven to be wrong, then we can talk. The key to this cannot be given, for herein lies the mystery of the esoteric calculations. And for the purposes of ordinary calculation, it has no sense. Let that sit for a second. The number 7, says the Kabbalah, is the great number of the divine mysteries. Number 10 is that of all human knowledge, Pythagorean decade. 1000 is the number 10 to the third power, and therefore the number 7000 is also symbolical. Why? Because it's 7 and you multiply it by the decade? See, that's the type of math that I talk about in numerology as being fucking stupid, right? Numerology has its place. If you are seeing consistently a triplicate of numbers, it is probably trying to tell you something, right? 111 is telling you that there is something new that needs to be learned here, or something is possible. 222 means that there is a choice to be made. 333 means that there is something to learn in the situation. 444 means that you are done learning that particular lesson. 555 means that it is time to get out into the world. 666 means that it is time to be the active participant in the world. 777 is the completion of a cycle. These numbers have meaning, but if you're doing complicated math with unknown exponents, you're probably doing it wrong. That is not to say that it is wrong, but it is probably wrong. You are overcomplicating something that is rather simple, right? If you can take an actual pattern and extrapolate math from that, then okay. But if you're doing complicated mathematics in order to get to something, you're doing it wrong. Gematria, I absolutely vehemently am against gematria. It doesn't matter which particular numbering system that you use. If you're taking a name and then you're assigning numeric values and adding that together and then simplifying that in order to find a message that may or may not be there, you're doing it wrong. That is a conspiracy. You are doing it wrong. Again, with the full understanding that I might be wrong, but I really don't think I am on this. This is one of those things that is not directly revealed, but something that I have worked out for myself, right? That you can take and assign numeric value to anything and make it say what you want to. They do it all the time. If Donald Trump was not enough to make it fit, it was Donald J. Trump. And if that didn't work, it was Donald John Trump. And if that didn't work, it was DJ Trump. Whatever it takes to be able to make you get what you want out of it is what you're going to do. That is wrong, right? The simple things, absolutely, right? If you see 222, it is letting you know something. You don't have to add that together. The simple indications, even simple math, right? If you were adding 2 numbers together to get another one, like if you're reducing a number to get another one, and that's the message, sometimes that is a valid thing, right? 35 is 5 and 3 added together, which is 8, which is going to give you a message. That is already pushing it. This is way pushing it, right? Well, we can't really tell you because you're not indoctrinated, so we can't give you this number. No. For me, the multiple of 7 is automatically wrong. It is automatically going to be a multiple of 8. The key to this cannot be given, for herein lies the mystery of esoteric calculations. And for the purpose of ordinary calculation, it has no sense. The number 7, says the Kabbalah, is the great number of the divine mysteries. The number 10 is that of human knowledge, Pythagorean decade. 1000 is the number 10 to the third power, and therefore the number 7000 is also symbolical. In the secret doctrine, the figure and number 4 are the male symbol only on the highest plane of abstraction. On the plane of matter, the 3 is the masculine and the 4 is the female. The upright and the horizontal are the fourth stage of symbolism, when the symbols become the glyphs of the generative powers on the physical plane. Now, who said that 3 is masculine and 4 is feminine? You just randomly decide that? And because somebody told you that 5,000 years ago, you're going to run with it, right? What makes it masculine? What makes it feminine? Why is one receptive? Why is one penetrative, which is the underlyings between masculine and feminine, right? The receptive and the generative. The reasoning behind it doesn't hold water, right? If it held water, if there was, okay, well, this is why this is male and this is why it is female, okay, maybe we can talk about that. But that's not what we're going to do, right? We're going to talk about a circle and a line. Well, you can draw the line however you want to. You could completely change it to where it doesn't start off vertical, it starts off horizontal. You can make it a complete line. You can make it a partial line. You can make it whatever you want. That to me does not make logically consistent sense. And so 7 isn't the number. Harmonics is. Harmonics makes sense. The base foundation of most things appear to be the number 8. I got a whole video about that, right? The basic harmonics, I think that's what I named it. I'll try and look it up and remember to link it, but the fundamental harmonics of life, that's what it is. There are 8 ways to classify stones, right? Like gemstones, both precious and semi-precious. There are 8 methods for that. There are 8 notes in a musical scale, including the beginning and the end. There are the 8 chakras of the human body. There are 8 in a multitude of things, and it appears to be the basis for reality. Base 8 is how we do computer computations. It is not possible to do it on a base 7, right? 8 appears to be the underpinnings of things. 7 is something that people have latched onto, and that may have been entirely intentional by the control systems to keep you from true knowledge. We see a lot of that. All right. Stanza 1 continued. 2. Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of duration. A. Time is only an illusion produced by the succession of our states of consciousness as we travel through eternal duration, and it does not exist where no consciousness exists in which the illusion can be produced but lies asleep. That is an extrapolation as well. You are assuming that because, like, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Does a bear shit in the woods? That is the same thing that is being done right here. You are assuming because you are not there to witness it, that it is not a thing. Time still goes on. Movement still happens. We just don't have the cognition of it. My dogs have a small cognition of time, but not a lot, right? My cat, even to a lesser degree. But the animals outside, animals and crickets, like crickets and ants and birds, they don't really have the concept of time like we do, but they still exist in it. It is still a thing. Time still passes whether they are aware that tomorrow is or not. This is a fallacy. This is assuming that because we do not have witness, it does not exist. And while it may be true, we don't have the capacity to say either way. Right? It is much like when we did the video yesterday, and we were talking about eternity and how it's not really that important. It's a great thought exercise for you to work through and to try and base your beliefs upon and try to understand, but you will not have that answer until this coil is done. Right? Until we are done in the corporeal form that we are here with, our voluntary existence that we are in. Until that is done, we will not have the answer to some of these things. This being one of them. This is something that somebody thought about. They probably spent an awful lot of time on, and they are maybe even right. But it's something that we will not know until the time comes where we are part of it. Right? I've had an experience with the eternal. I have seen eternity unfold. Right? That is That is a big statement. I have seen the beginnings of our cosmos, right? That was part of my spiritual experience. I got to see the formation of the cosmos. I got to see the underpinnings of each of us together. Those lines I talked about, right? There's a line between me and you if we are ever going to meet, or if you are ever going to learn anything from me. That is a connection. That is a thread. That is a line. That is a conduit. That is a channel, however you want to term it, right? That is real. That is something that I saw in the eternity. Now, my subjective experience of spirituality, which led to what I do, I could be wrong in. It could be a complete figment of my imagination. I don't believe so, because I have used that to effect real change in my life based upon that. But it could still be me being wrong. We have to hold that in our minds as we go through these studies, right? If you are wrong, be correctable. Always, always. No matter how long it has been written, that does not make it correct. The present is only a mathematical line which divides that part of the eternal duration which we call the future from that part which we call the past. Nothing on earth has real duration, for nothing remains without change, or the same for the billionth part of a second. And see, now that is kind of true, right? That is, there is no permanence because you are always in constant motion. And even, like if I sit here in complete silence and stillness and do not move anything for 5 minutes, which is very hard to do, my breath still happens. The exchange inside of me still happens, and I change just a little bit. So, okay, it's not permanent. But I am here for a duration. Whether that duration ends in 5 minutes or in 50 more years, I'm here for that duration. I am here for this experience. This is real. This is not Maya, right? The illusion. We are here. We are accomplishing things. Some of those things make reality mutable. We can change what is going to happen in the future by our decisions today. And so the future is in part mutable, but we are here for a real duration. This corporeal form will only be here for a certain amount of time. The spiritual, to me, is eternal. It was prior, it will be after. But while you are here, you are bound by the rules of corporality, and those have duration. So again, this is something that I do not necessarily believe. And I understand that my understanding and their understanding are different things. I am here to reveal. And the sensation we have of the actuality of the division of time, known as the present, comes from the blurring of that momentary glimpse or succession of glimpses, which things that our senses give us, as those things pass from the region of ideals, which we call the future, to the regions of memories that we name the past. In the same way, we experience a sensation of duration in the case of the instantaneous electric spark, by reason of the blurred and continuing impression on the retina. The real person or thing does not consist solely of what is seen at any particular moment, but is composed of the sum of all its various and changing conditions, from its appearance in the material form to its disappearance from the earth. It is these sum totals that exist from eternity in the future and pass by degrees through matter to exist for eternity in the past. No one could say that a bar of metal dropped into the sea came into existence as it left the air, and ceased to exist as it entered the water, and that the bar itself consisted only of that cross-section thereof, which at any given moment coincided with the mathematical plane that separates, and, at the same time, joins the atmosphere and the ocean. Even so of persons and things which, dropping out of the to-be into the has-been, out of the future into the past, present momentarily to our senses a cross-section, as it were, of their total selves, as they pass through time and space, as matter, on their way from one eternity to another. And these two constitute that duration in which alone anything has true existence. Were our senses but able to cognize it there? You don't know that you can't. 3. Universal mind was not, for there were no he, celestial beings, to contain, hence to manifest, it, he. Mind is a name given to the sum of the states of consciousness grouped under thought, will, and feeling. During deep sleep, ideation ceases on the physical plane and memory is in abeyance. Thus, for the time being, mind is not. Because the organ through which the ego manifests ideation and memory on the material plane has temporarily ceased to function. That is not true. It is still functioning. Your brain is still functioning when you are asleep. You are not aware. You are not awake. You may even be on the spiritual plane, right? I do believe in out of body. I do believe in astral projection. I do believe that you can take the soul out of the temple and do things with it. It is not necessarily the most wise thing to do for various reasons that most people are not equipped to understand, right? You can be possessed if you astrally project if you are not taking the proper precautions. You can be possessed by an entity. Some people don't believe that. That's okay. You don't have to. Some of the people who are mentally disabled has had that happen. Either as when they were younger by inadvertent chance or as they get older by practice, right? They can remove themselves from their vessel and that vessel can be filled by something else. So your mind, which is the soul, right? The soul is the deciding factor. It is not the brain, but it is the part that controls the brain. Your mind is there even if you are not awake, right? When you are dreaming, you may be on a different plane. You may be experiencing something different, but your brain is still functioning. It is still causing your breath to happen. That is the Holy Spirit, but it works through the brain, right? The various sections of your brain handle the automatic functions. It is still functioning when you're asleep. Just because you do not have the cognitive ability to affect change around you when you're asleep does not mean that you are not still an entity while you're asleep. A nomenon can become a phenomenon on any plane of existence only by manifesting on that plane through an appropriate basis or vehicle. And during the long night of rest called pralaya, when all the existences are dissolved, the universal mind remains as a permanent possibility of mental action, or as the abstract absolute thought, of which mind is the concrete relative manifestation. And again, this is a nice thought exercise, but again, it is not a provable thing. The Ahi, Diane Kokans, are the collective host of spiritual beings, the angelic host of Christianity, the Elohim and messengers of the Jews, who are the vehicles for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will. They are the intelligent forces that give to and enact in nature her laws, while themselves acting according to laws imposed upon them by in a similar manner by still higher powers. But they are not the personifications of the powers of nature, as erroneously thought. The hierarchy of spiritual beings, through which the universal mind comes into action, is like an army, a host, truly, by means of which the fighting power of a nation manifests itself, and which is composed of army corps, divisions, brigades, regiments, and so forth, each with its separate individuality or life, and its limited freedom of action and limited responsibilities, each contained in a larger individuality, to which its own interests are subservient, and each containing lesser individualities itself. Now, I took the time yesterday, you can go back to the video, where we talked about the theory of spiritual evolution. I do believe that there are beings beyond us, right? We are on the fifth plane of existence. Dogs are on the fourth plane of existence. The elementals, in my estimation, and the disincorporated spirits of humans that are clinging to the mortal plane, those are the sixth level. And then the entities, angels, demons, aliens, whatever you want to call them, they are on the sixth plane, right, or the seventh plane. They are beyond us on the seventh plane of existence, just below divinity, expressly doing the will of divinity, whether it is positive or negative. And so I do believe that there are entities. I don't know the hierarchy. It may be exactly like this with different ranks and the different structure. But again, that is something that I do not know. I have opened myself up to the entities, and as of yet, I do not have any takers. I have not been approached by any elementals or the greater entities which exist on the seventh plane. I have asked, I have not received. The other things that I have asked for, the healing, that has happened. That was directly me and Source. There was no intervention there. There was no angel that I prayed to. I didn't have to go, oh, Michael, heal me, please. Right? Nothing of that nature. It was me moving the energies to where it needed to be. And so, this may be correct. It may not. I don't know. There's a lot of that. And I'm fine with not knowing. Right? I want to know, but I am fine with not. The 7 ways to bliss, moksha, or nirvana, were not. The great causes of mystery, nidana and maya, were not, for there was no one to produce and get ensnared by them. Alright, so the first footnote is Nepang in China, Nibbana in Burma, and moksha in India. The second one, nidana, the 12 nidanas, the Tibetan Tenbrel Chugni, the chief causes of existence, effects generated by a concatenation of causes produced. There are 7 paths, or ways, to the bliss of non-existence, which is absolute being, existence, and consciousness. They were not, because the universe was, so far, empty, and existed only in divine thought, for it is. B. The 12 nidanas, or causes of being. Each is the effect of its antecedent cause, and a cause in its turn to its successor. The sum total of the nidanas being based on the 4 truths, a doctrine especially characteristic of the Hinayana system. Let's go ahead and check that footnote. See Wasaleaf on Buddhism, page 97 to 950. That is a very long range. They belong to the theory of the stream of catenated law which produces merit and demerit and finally brings karma into full sway. It is based upon the great truth that reincarnation is to be dreaded, as existence in this world only entails upon man suffering, misery, and pain. And this is where I am going to take extreme exception. Suffering, misery, and pain are part of the existence. Absolutely true. Some of the lessons absolutely suck. If you are unfamiliar with my story, many of my experiences absolutely sucked. But I have learned something from every one of them. Every single experience that you have is part of a lesson. Whether that lesson is simply to grieve, which is a lesson. I don't know why people cannot understand this. Like, why do kids die at the age of 2? It's because you needed to learn grief. That is why. That is why your child died. Because you needed to learn grief. That may seem to suck, but that is because you are on the mortal. You are meant to get over that. You are not meant to dwell upon your child dying for 40 years. My grandmother did that. My grandmother, for 40 years of her life, lamented her child dying. And that is somewhat understandable, but what if you get stuck in that pain? That is exactly what your existence is going to be. But this is not a prison. You are not here for punishment. Karma does exist, but it is intricately tied to the lessons that you learned. It is not something that you cannot overcome. It is not something that you cannot surmount. Now, that means that my definition of karma and other people's definition of karma are not going to necessarily coincide, and that, to me, is perfectly fine. I go with what I say, right? I believe that you can learn a lesson from things, and because you can learn a lesson from things, you can change the karmic debt. Sometimes that is you changing the karmic debt accumulated by other people, such as your parents, and overcoming things that they succumb to. For me, a great example of that is racism. I say all of the time, the house I grew up in, racism was not a stranger, but the house where my children grew up in, it was, because I made the intentional choice to change that karmic debt. So, what is being said here, again, I do not necessarily agree with. I do believe that suffering, misery, and pain are here. They are here for a reason. You are meant to feel all of your emotions. Anger, pain, sadness, those are emotions. Happiness, contentment, joy, those are emotions. You are meant to feel them. They all tell you something about your life. If you're angry, it means to remove yourself from the situation. Most times. Sometimes it means time to defend yourself in the situation. But you are meant to feel all of those things. They all play an intricate part in the lesson that you are here to learn. And until you learn it, that is going to repeat, right? If your lesson is grief and you get tied up in the grief, you are learning that lesson until you learn that lesson. And each time that you do not learn the lesson, it gets a little bit harder. Right? If you are a thief and you start stealing things, there's going to be consequences, right? The first time that you get caught, it's going to be a slap on the wrist, most likely, depending upon what it is. But you're probably going to mostly get away with it. You got to pay a little bit of restitution. You got to say you're sorry. There may even be some civic penalties. But the next time you get caught, it's a little bit harder. You're a second offender. Now you're going to have greater penalties. The third time you get caught, it is even harder than that. It is the exact same with karma. If you don't learn the lesson repeats. Every single time. Doesn't matter what the lesson is. If you do not learn the lesson, you will repeat the lesson. That is karma. We are here for those lessons voluntarily. You decided to come here. You decided as a member of the divine, right? You are not divine, but you are a tiny sliver of the divine making choices for the 5D. You made the decision that you wanted to be incarnated. It's not a prison. You're not just thrown back into this. Now, I understand that is completely different than what most people are going to tell you. But that is, again, something that was directly revealed to me. That is something that was a revelation to me. You don't have to believe it. I am not here to convince you. I'm here to tell you. Back to the text. Death itself being unable to deliver man from it, since death is merely the door through which he passes to another life on earth after a little rest on his threshold. Devasham. The Hinayana system, or school of the little vehicle, is of very ancient growth, while the Mahayana is of a later period, having originated after the death of Buddha. Yet the tenets of the latter are as old as the hills that have contained such schools from time immemorial. And the Hinayana and Mahayana schools, the latter, that of the great vehicle, both teach the same doctrine in reality. Yana, or vehicle, in Sanskrit, Vahan, is a mystic expression. Both vehicles inculcating that man may escape the sufferings of rebirths and even the false bliss of Devasham by obtaining wisdom and knowledge, which alone can dispel the fruits of illusion and ignorance. Right? That is learning your lessons. Right? Obtaining wisdom and knowledge would be the learning of the lesson. Again, I don't believe that you are forced to come here. I believe that we voluntarily take upon ourselves challenges. I believe that I challenged myself greatly before I came here, and that is why I've suffered so greatly. But I'm no longer suffering, even though I still have problems. It is not a suffering problem. It is merely me trying to learn the lessons these days. Maya, or illusion, is an element which enters into all finite things. For everything that exists has only a relative, not an absolute reality, since the appearance which the hidden noumenon, assumes for any observer depends upon his power of cognition. To the untrained eye of the savage, a painting is at first an unmeaning confusion of streaks and daubs of color, while an educated eye sees instantly a face or a landscape. I am going to stop there because that is not true. That is not true. That is simply not true, right? Now, you can make the argument that maybe Picasso, maybe some of these impressionists or something along those natures, surrealist, maybe. But for a classically trained painter, right, your Rembrandts or your Michelangelos or whoever it may happen to be, it doesn't matter if I pull some savage from some island, their terminology, and I put them into the Louvre. They see the Mona Lisa, they're going to see a face. They're going to see the woman who was Mona Lisa. That is going to happen when I see the Sunday in a park, despite the fact that it's all a whole bunch of little bitty dots and there's no actual picture painted. They're still going to see people in the park. They're not going to see random streaks. That is not going to happen. This is a false equivocation, and I will point those out. Back to the text. You're not going to be able to recognize a face because you don't have education is fucking wild. Nothing is permanent except the one hidden absolute existence which contains in itself the noumena of all realities. Okay, so, yes, you are here for a limited time, and so therefore to your soul this reality is not permanent. But the rules of the incorporation state that we are here in a temporary manner, so death is permanent for the body, right? You are not going to get this particular 5D temple back. It's not going to happen. It will be a little bit different, even if it is really close. The whole Maya or illusion is like game theory. It doesn't really matter, right? This might be a simulation. It might be a computer program that somebody else is running, but does it matter? Not really. You still have to play by the rules of the simulation. You still have to do the things that you were written into the program to do. And so, for me, the whole, well, this is really just an illusion, is a way of participating in victim mentality. It is putting off for the eternal something that you should really be taking care of here in the mortal. Whether or not it is an illusion does not really matter. You are here incorporated with rules to play by, right? Some of those rules are kind of mutable. You can do things which are outside of the ordinary, but for the most part, you are here with definite rules. The existences belonging to every plane of being, up to the highest Diane Kokans, are, in degree, of the nature of shadows cast by a magic lantern on a colorless screen. But all things are relatively real, for the cognizer is also a reflection, and the things cognized are therefore as real to him as himself. Whatever reality things possess must be looked for in them before or after they have passed like a flash through the material world. But we cannot cognize any such existence directly, so long as we have sense instruments which bring only material existence into the field of our consciousness. Whatever plane our consciousness may be acting in, both we and the things belonging to that plane are, for the time being, our only realities. As we rise in the scale of development, we perceive that during the stages through which we have passed, we mistook shadows for realities, and the upward progress of the ego is a series of progressive awakenings, each advance bringing with it the idea that now, at last, we have reached reality. But only when we have reached the absolute consciousness and blended our own with it, shall we be free from the delusions produced by Maya. Now, I have been reunited with absolute consciousness. It is part of the spiritual experience which we talk about so often. I have been pulled out of the mortal into the eternal. I have seen time pass in much greater scale than I should have been able to. Now, for me, it is impossible for me to make that up. Aphantasia is a thing that I have, right? I am overcoming it. I have now, for the first time in my life, been able to imagine a color and it actually be the color, right? That is new. That is something that I am working on. It is part of my healing process. But for me, there is no close your eyes and imagine the universe. It doesn't happen. There's no close your eyes. Like, I can look at this glass of tea, close my eyes, and I cannot picture that glass of tea. I cannot picture a blade of grass. I cannot picture a box. I cannot picture a white wall, right? That is something that is changing, right? I can picture a white wall these days, but the rest of it I still can't. And so I have experienced a little bit of the eternal. It was an experience outside of myself. And it did not give me in any way, shape, or form the understanding that this temporary life is just an illusion and we don't need to be concerned with it at all, in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. The exact opposite, as a matter of fact. I keep dropping these glasses. I am terrible about that. Darkness alone filled the boundless all, for Father, Mother, and Son were once more one, and the Son had not awakened yet for the new wheel, and his pilgrimage thereupon. We are going to check the footnote. That which is called wheel is symbolical expression for a world or globe, which shows that the ancients were aware that our earth was a revolving globe, not a motionless square, as some Christian fathers taught. The great wheel is the whole duration of our cycle of being, or Mahakalpa. An example, the whole revolution of our special chain of 7 planets, or spheres, from beginning to end, the small wheels, meaning the rounds, of which there are also 7. It is important to note that, yes, we are on a globe. That is something that some people find exception with, especially in spiritualist communities and Christian communities. When it defined in the firmament in the Bible, it was not talking about a flat plane, right? The globe can have a firmament too. It does not mean that it is impenetrable. It means that there is a separation. Just as there is a separation between water and air, like the air we breathe, that fluid that we were talking about earlier, there is another separation between the air and the space. That is the firmament. It is electromagnetics in action. It is not some glass, right? We are not in a snow globe. We are on a globe. We are on a sphere, hurtling through space with predetermination. We have patterns. We move in cycles. That is all real. That is all true, whether you believe it or not. Darkness is father, mother, light their son, says an old Eastern proverb. Light is inconceivable except as coming from some source which is the cause of it, and as, in the instance of primordial light, that source is unknown, though as strongly demanded by reason and logic. Therefore, it is called darkness by us from an intellectual point of view. As to borrowed or secondary light, whatever its source, it can be but a temporary, myopic character. Darkness, then, is the eternal matrix in which the sources of light appear and disappear. Nothing is added to darkness to make it light, to make of it light, or to light to make it darkness on this plane. They are interchangeable, and scientifically, light is but a mode of darkness and vice versa. That is pretty close to true, right? Without light, there is no darkness. Without darkness, there is no light. Light is the absence of darkness, and darkness is the absence of light. It's like one of those sliding scales that I like to talk about all of the time. They are on the same coin, right? One is the front, one is the back. You either have the one or you have the other. Just the same as I use for my determination in the MBTI things, right? You either things or ideas. You are one or the other. You are either new or old. You are one or the other. It is either for you or someone else. It is one of those two, right? It is the same with darkness and light. It is one or the other. And it's like the virtues and the vices. You are either chaste or you're lustful. It is one or the other, right? You're to find the balance, right? To be a little bit chaste and a little bit lustful. You're meant to be a little bit greedy and a little bit charitable. You are meant to find that balance. Find the balance between the light and the dark. Yet, both are phenomena of the same noumenon, which is absolute darkness to the scientific mind, but a gray twilight to the perception of the average mystic. Though, to that of the spiritual eye of the initiate, it is absolute light. How far we discern the light that shines in the darkness depends upon our powers of vision. What is light to us is darkness to certain insects, and the eye of the clairvoyant sees illumination where the normal eye perceives only blackness. When the whole universe was plunged in sleep, and had returned to its one primordial element, there was neither center of luminosity nor eye to perceive light, and darkness necessarily filled the boundless all. And again, that is an extrapolation. That is probably true, but again, we do not have evidence thereof. It could have been all light. And that is just me being contrarian, so I do that often. B. The father-mother are the male and female principles in root nature, the opposite poles that manifest in all things on every plane of cosmos, or spirit and substance, in a less allegorical aspect, the resultant of which is the universe, or the sun. They are once more one. Then in the night of Brahma, during Pralaya, all in the objective universe has returned to its one primal and eternal cause, to reappear at the following dawn as it does periodically. Karana, eternal cause, was alone. To put it more plainly, Karana is alone during the nights of Brahma. The previous objective universe has dissolved into its one primal and eternal cause, and is, so to say, held in solution in space, to differentiate again and crystallize out anew at the following Manvanteric dawn, which is the commencement of a new day, or new activity of Brahma, the symbol of the universe. And again, that is extrapolation. That is not something that we know, even me, right? I believe that I saw the formation of the universe, but that is entirely subjective. It was inside my head. I believe it is true. I cannot prove that it is true. That is an important distinction to keep in mind, right? Even for me, knowing the things that I do, having accomplished the things that I do, I still have to keep it in my mind that I could be wrong. That the things which I am merely speculating upon cannot be proven, right? I cannot objectively prove to you that I have witnessed the creation of the universe. In the same manner, this is somebody trying to explain something. They have probably spent an awful lot of time on it, but that does not necessarily mean it is correct. In esoteric parlance, Brahma is father, mother, son, or spirit, soul, and body at once. And that I don't necessarily disagree with. Each personage being symbolical of an attribute, and each attribute, or quality, being graduated efflux of divine breath in its cyclic differentiation, involutionary and evolutionary. In the cosmico-physical sense, it is the universe, the planetary chain, and the earth. In the purely spiritual, the unknown deity, planetary spirit, and man, the son of the two, the creature of spirit and matter, and a manifestation of them in his periodical appearances on earth during the wheels, or the Manvantaras. Stanza, or part 6 of stanza 1. The 7 sublime lords and the 7 truths had ceased to be, and the universe, the son of necessity, was immersed into Paranishapana, absolute perfection, paranirvana, which is young grub, to be outbreathed by that which is and yet is not was. The 7 sublime lords are the 7 creative spirits, the Dayan Kokans, who correspond to the Hebrew Elohim. It is the same hierarchy of archangels to which St. Michael, St. Gabriel, and others belong in the Christian theogony. Only while St. Michael, for instance, is allowed in dogmatic Latin theology to watch over all the promontories and gulfs. In the esoteric system, the Dionys watch successively over one of the rounds and the great root races of our planetary chain. They are, moreover, said to send their bodhisattvas, the human correspondents of the Dhyani Buddhas, and of whom vide infra, during every round and race. Out of the 7 truths and revelations, or rather revealed secrets, 4 only have been handed to us, as we are still in the 4th round, and the world also has only had 4 Buddhas so far. This is a very complicated question and will receive more ample treatment later on. I would like to know what these 4 truths and 4 are, right? I want to know what all 7 are, because I have 7 as the important number, but it includes 8. But the 8 can be the divine, which is the source and the return, so it doesn't necessarily have to be differentiated, right? In much the same way that the scale starts with C and ends with C, or starts with B and ends with B, depending on what you're doing. It doesn't have to necessarily be defined by differentiation. It can be the encompassing. So, if there are 7 truths, that is because the 8th truth is the divine. So far, there are only 4 truths and 4 Vedas, say the Hindus and Buddhists. For a similar reason, Irenaeus insisted on the necessity of 4 Gospels. But as every new root race at the head of the round must have its revelation and revealers, the next round will bring the 5th, the following the 6th, and so on. Parana Shipana is the absolute perfection to which all existence is attained at the close of the great period of activity, or Maha Manvantara, and in which they rest during the succeeding period of repose. In Tibetan, it is called Yongrub. Up to the day of the Yogacharya school, the true nature of Parinirvana was taught publicly, but since then it has become entirely esoteric. Hence, so many contradictory interpretations of it. It is only a true idealist who can understand it. Everything has to be viewed as ideal, with the exception of Parinirvana, by him who would comprehend that state and acquire a knowledge of how non-ego, voidness, and darkness are 3 in 1 and alone self-existent and perfect. It is absolute, however, only in a relative sense, for it must give room to still further absolute perfection, according to a higher standard of excellence in the following period of activity. Just as a perfect flower must cease to be a perfect flower and die in order to grow into a perfect fruit, if a somewhat Irish mode of expression may be permitted. The secret doctrine teaches the progressive development of everything, worlds as well as atoms, and this stupendous development has neither conceivable beginning nor imaginable end. Our universe is only one of an infinite number of universes, all of them sons of necessity, because links in the great cosmic chain of universes, each one standing in relation to an effect as regards its predecessor, and being a cause as regards its successor. Now, this is also something that I believe, right? I believe in the multiverse, which is contained within the universe. That can be a little bit hard, so let me explain. I believe that every conceivable outcome actually happens. But you, the soul that is making the decisions for the 5D, make decisions about specific things, right? You make a decision to drink your tea. You make a decision to record a video, and each one of those steps sends you off along this path. But not drinking this tea creates its own path. Not making this video creates its own path. Both of those things happened, but the path that I am on is drinking the tea and making the video. Those other paths, some of them may lead to me not being here right now, right? I could have not drank my tea this morning. This is my first one. And by deciding not to do that, I could have had a heart attack and died. But then that's just an extrapolation, right? But because I decided to drink my tea, I'm on this path where I stay alive. I believe that that path happened. Somewheres out there, there is a world going on without me. There are multiples of them. In those worlds, I am an NPC, which is a non-player character. In those worlds, I don't even really make decisions. I work off of what the decisions are on that timeline. On this timeline, my multiverse, my area, I am making the decisions. On occasions, we can come into agreement about decisions. We can both decide to drink the same tea, right? We are aligned for the period that it takes for us to drink the tea. But when we are done, we diverge again. And I go on being a player in my timeline. You go on as a player in your timeline. But in your timeline, if we are not actively working together, then I am an NPC. I am not a player character in your timeline unless we are aligned. But those still go on. Those timelines still play out. Somewheres along the way, on someone else's player character, I drank my tea and it didn't cause my death, but it created a whole chain of events that are different from what we are doing now. All of those continue at the same time, but the one that you are in charge of is the one that you are in charge of. You are making the decisions to be here, and by making the decisions, you create the experience for the all. That experience can be positive, it can be negative, it can be beneficial, it can be detrimental. It is up to you on how that plays out. But this is not out of alignment with what I think, right? Our universe, my particular timeline, is only one of an infinite number of universes or timelines. Same thing, same concept. I came to it independent of any of these readings, right? That is something that I have been working on myself for a very long time. It is something that I worked out for myself, and it is something which I see reflected in this text, but it is not something I have pulled from the text. It is something that is explained by the text, and either one of us could be correct, or either one of us could be completely wrong. Again, that is not even really that important. It is merely a belief that I hold. But it is one that is intrinsic to the manifestation that I do. On my timeline, the healing works. The appearance and disappearance of the universe as pictured are pictured as an outbreathing and inbreathing of the great breath, which is eternal and which, being motion, is one of the three aspects of the absolute, abstract space and duration being the other two. When the great breath is projected, it is called the divine breath, and is regarded as the breathing of the unknowable deity, the one existence, which breathes out a thought, as it were, and becomes the cosmos. See Isis Unveiled. We have a whole playlist on that. So also it is when the divine breath is inspired again, the universe disappears into the bosom of the Great Mother, who then sleeps, wrapped in her invisible robes. C. By that which is and yet is not is meant the great breath itself, which we can only speak of as absolute existence, but cannot picture to our imagination as any form of existence that we can distinguish from non-existence. The three periods, the present, the past, and the future, are, in the esoteric philosophy, a compound time, for the three are a composite number only in relation to the phenomenal plane, but in the realm of noumena have no abstract validity, as said in the scriptures. The past time is the present time, also the future, which, though it has not come into existence, still is, according to a precept in the Prasanga Madhyamika teaching, whose dogmas have been known ever since it broke away from the purely esoteric schools. See the Zungarian Mani Kambum, the Book of 10,000 Precepts. Also consult Wasliv's Der Buddhamus. Our ideas, in short, on duration and time are all derived from our sensations according to the laws of association. Inextricably bound up with the relativity of human knowledge, they nevertheless can have no existence except in the experience of the individual ego, and perish when its evolutionary march dispels the maya of phenomenal existence. What is time, for instance, but the panoramic succession of our states of consciousness? In the words of a master, I feel irritated at having to use these three clumsy words: past, present, and future, miserable concepts of the objective phases of the subjective whole. They are about as ill adapted for the purpose as an axe for fine carving. What the fuck ever. One has to acquire paramartha, lest one should become too easy a prey to samvriti, is a philosophical axiom. We're going to go ahead and pull that. In clearer words, one has to acquire true self-consciousness in order to understand samvriti, or the origin of delusion. Paramartha is the synonym of the Sanskrit term svasamvedana, or the reflection which analyzes itself. There is a difference in the interpretation of the meaning of paramartha between the Yogacaras and the Madhyamikas, neither of whom, however, explain the real and true esoteric sense of expression. See further, sloka number 9. The causes of existence had been done away with. The visible that was, and the invisible that is, rested in eternal non-being, the one being. A. The causes of existence mean not only the physical causes known to science, but the metaphysical causes, the chief of which is the desire to exist, an outcome of Nidana and Maya. This desire for a sentient life shows itself in everything, from an atom to a sun, and is a reflection of the divine thought propelled into objective existence, into a law that the universe should exist. According to esoteric teaching, the real cause of that supposed desire, and of all existence, remains forever hidden, and its first emanations are the most complete abstractions mind can conceive. These abstractions must of necessity be postulated as the cause of the material universe, which presents itself to the senses and intellect, and they underlie the secondary and subordinate powers of nature, which, anthropomorphized, have been worshipped as God and gods by the common herd of every age. It is impossible to conceive anything without a cause. An attempt to do so makes the mind a blank. This is virtually the condition to which the mind must come at last when we try to trace back the chain of causes and effects. But both science and religion jump to this condition of blankness much more quickly than is necessary, for they ignore the metaphysical abstractions which are the only conceivable cause of physical concretions. These abstractions become more and more concrete as they approach our plane of existence, until finally they phenomenalize in the form of the material universe by a process of conversion of metaphysics into physics, analogous to that by which steam can be condensed into water and water frozen into ice. The idea of eternal non-being, which is the one being, will appear a paradox to anyone who does not remember that we limit our ideas of being to our present consciousness of existence, making it a specific instead of a generic term. An unborn infant could think it in our acceptation of that term, would necessarily limit its conception of being, in a similar manner, to the intrauterine life which alone it knows. And were it to endeavor to express to its consciousness the idea of life after birth, death to it, it would, in the absence of data to go upon, and of faculties to comprehend such data, probably express that life as non-being which is real being. In our case, the one being is the noumenon of all the noumena, which we must know underlie phenomena, and give them whatever shadow of reality they possess, but which we have not the senses or intellect to cognize at present. The impalpable atoms of gold scattered through the substance of a ton of auriferous quartz may be imperceptible to the naked eye of the miner, yet he knows that they are not only present there, but that they alone give his quartz any appreciable value. And this relation to the gold of the gold to the quartz may faintly shadow forth that of the noumenon to the phenomenon. But the miner knows what the gold will look like when extracted from the quartz, whereas the common mortal can form no conception of the reality of things separated from the Maya which veils them, and in which they are hidden. Alone, the initiate, rich with the lore acquired by numberless generations of his predecessors, directs the eye of Dangma towards the essence of things in which no Maya can have any influence. It is here that the teachings of esoteric philosophy in relation to the Nidanas and the Four Truths become of the greatest importance, but they are secret. 8. Alone, the one form of existence, stretched, boundless, infinite, causeless, in dreamless sleep, and life pulsated, unconscious in universal space throughout that all-presence, which is sensed by the opened eye of the Dagba. The tendency of modern thought is to recur to the archaic idea of a homogeneous basis for apparently widely different things. Sorry, I got to get rid of these hiccups. Heterogeneity developed from homogeneity. Biologists are now searching for their homogeneous protoplasm and chemists for their protyle, while science is looking for the force of which electricity, magnetism, heat, and so forth are the differentiations. That would be plasma. The secret doctrine carries this idea into the region of metaphysics and postulates a one form of existence as the basis and source of all things. But perhaps the phrase, the one form of existence, is not altogether correct. The Sanskrit word is prabhavapaya, the place, or rather plane, whence emerges the origination, and into which is the resolution of all things. So, source, says a commentator, it is not the mother of the world, as translated by Wilson, see Book 1, Vishnu Purana, for Jagad Yoni, as shown by Fitz-Edward Hall, is scarcely so much the mother of the world, or the womb of the world, as the material cause of the universe. The Puranic commentators explain it by Karana, cause, but the esoteric philosophy by the ideal spirit of that cause. It is, in its secondary stage, the Svabhavat of the Buddhist philosophers, the eternal cause and effect, omnipresent yet abstract, the self-existent, plastic essence, and the root of all things, viewed in the same dual light as the Vedantin views his Parabrahm and Mula Prakriti, the one under two aspects. It seems, indeed, extraordinary to find great scholars speculating on the possibility of the Vedanta and the Uttaramamasa, especially, having been evoked by the teaching of the Buddhists. I missed where this footnote was, so I guess we're just going to skip it. In India, it is called the Eye of Siva, but beyond the Great Range, it is known as Dangma's opened eye. Dangma means a purified soul who has become a Jivan Mukta. I decided not to skip it. The highest adept, or rather a Mahatma, so called. His opened eye is the inner spiritual eye of the seer, and the faculty which manifests through it is not clairvoyance as ordinarily understood. An example, the power of seeing at a distance, but rather the faculty of spiritual intuition, through which direct and certain knowledge is obtainable. This faculty is intimately connected with the third eye, which mythological tradition ascribes to certain races of men. Fuller explanations will be found in Book 3. All right, we're going to talk about the third eye because it is a thing, right? You have 7 internal chakras. One of those is the third eye chakra, but it is centered upon the actual physical thing, right? Each one of the chakras is, in fact, centered upon a physical location in the body. The base is right around your butthole. That's a crude way of putting it, but it is true. And when you flex your butthole, you tighten it up like you're pinching a turd, you're flexing your base chakra. You can do the same for all of them. If you thrust forward just a little bit, you're flexing your sacral. It is located around the generative area, which is not the nuts, but is instead the prostate or the uterine opening. Not necessarily the vaginal opening, but inside and up, right? On top of that, you got your stomach. You can do a crunch and you can flex that one. You can flex your chest back and forth and you can flex that one. If you take your tongue and you try to stick it on your uvula, which is the hangy down thing in your throat, it expands your throat. That expands your throat chakra, which is flexing that one. You can do the same thing for your third eye. Now, the third eye is located, if you put your fingers right here, just in front of the ears, behind the eyes, right around the temple, and you draw a line between those two. And then you go between the eyes and you come back here to where the skull comes down kind of in a V. Some people it's more of a U, but that very lowest point, and you make a line between those and you intersect those two lines, that's where your third eye lies. It is your pineal gland. You can flex that. For me, the discovery of flexing that particular chakra was, if you have ever been on a plane and your ears get really heavy and you go and try to pop them, that's how you flex it. It is an internal flex of the ear canal muscles almost, but it forces a compression in the internals and it helps you to break the veil, which is part of it. So you do have a third eye, and it is something that you can activate. As far as I am aware, it is not specific to any race of men, as is said here. Now, we started this off by saying that they held some not correct beliefs due to the time period, right? That may be part of it. It may just be a simple misunderstanding of both what the third eye is and how to activate it. But you can activate your third eye. I talk about how in the Infinite Integration playlist, but it involves moving energy, forcing the break to happen. There is no, I'm drinking fluoride, so it's got my pineal gland calcified, so I cannot use it. That is not real. That is not a real thing. You naturally accumulate the calcification that happens to the pineal gland from every single thing that you consume. If you are not flexing that particular muscle, it atrophies, and part of the atrophy that happens when you do not flex the muscle is the calcification. It is not the government holding you back. It is your lack of dedication. You can activate your third eye. All right. Evoked by the teachings of the Buddhists. Whereas, on the contrary, Buddhism of Gautama, the Buddha, that was evoked and entirely upreared on the tenets of the secret doctrine, of which a partial sketch is here attempted, and on which also the Upanishads are made to rest. We'll go ahead and check that footnote. And yet, one claiming authority, namely Sir Monier Williams, Bowdoin Professor of Sanskrit at Oxford, has just denied this fact. This is what he taught his audience on June the 4th, 1888, in his annual address before the Victoria Institute of Great Britain. Originally, Buddhism set its face against all solitary asceticism to obtain sublime heights of knowledge. It had no occult, no esoteric system of doctrine withheld from ordinary men. And again, when Gautama Buddha began his career, the later and lower form of yoga seems to have been little known. And then, contradicting himself, the learned lecturer forthwith informs his audience that we learn from the Lalita Vistara that various forms of bodily torture, self-maceration, and austerity were common in Gautama's time. But the lecturer seems quite unaware that this kind of torture and self-maceration is precisely the lower form of yoga, Hatha Yoga, which was little known and yet so common in Gautama's time. The above, according to the teachings of Sri Sankaracharya, is undeniable, and we're going to check that one. It is even argued that all these 6 darsanas, schools of philosophy, show traces of Buddha's influence, either taken from Buddhism or due to Greek teaching. See Weber, Max Muller, etc. We labor under the impression that Colebrooke, the highest authority in such matters, had long ago settled the question by showing that the Hindus were in this instance the teachers, not the learners. B. Dreamless sleep is one of the 7 states of consciousness known in Oriental esotericism. In each of these states, a different portion of the mind comes into action, or, as a Vedantin would express it, the individual is conscious of a different plane of his being. The term dreamless sleep in this case is applied allegorically to the universe to express a condition somewhat analogous to that state of consciousness in man, which, not being remembered in a waking state, seems a blank, just as the sleep of the mesmerized subject seems to him an unconscious blank when he returns to his normal condition, although he has been talking and acting as a conscious individual would. Now, I have dreamless sleep. It is very rare that I ever sleep or dream at all, and if I do dream, it is exceptionally vivid, and it generally has some bearing into futurity. That is not to say that I am a prophet, but if I have a dream, it is normally played out very shortly thereafter in reality. Stanza 1 continued, part 9. But where was the Dhamma when the alaya of the universe, soul as the basis of all anima mundi, was in Paramatha, absolute being, and consciousness, which are the absolute non-being and unconsciousness, and the great will was Anupadaka. Here we have before us the subject of centuries of scholastic disputations. The 2 terms, alaya and paramartha, have been the causes of dividing schools and splitting the truth into more different aspects than any other mystic terms. Alaya is literally the soul of the world, or anima mundi, the oversoul of Emerson, and according to esoteric teaching, it changes periodically its nature. Alaya, though eternal and changeless in its inner essence on the planes which are unreachable by either men or cosmic gods, dhyana buddhis, alters during the active life period with respect to the lower planes, ours included. During that time, not only the dhyana buddhas are one with alaya in soul and essence, but even the man strong in the yoga, mystic meditation, is able to merge his soul with it. Arya Sangha, the Bhumapa school. This is not nirvana, but a condition next to it. Hence the disagreement. Thus, while the Yogacharas of the Mahayana school say that alaya is the personification of the voidness, and yet alaya, Nyingpo and the Sang in Tibetan, is the basis of every visible and invisible thing, and that, though it is eternal and immutable in its essence, it reflects itself in every object of the universe, like the moon in clear, tranquil waters. Other schools dispute the statement. The same for Paramartha. The Yogacharyas interpret the term as that which is also dependent upon other things, Paratantra, and the Madhyamikas say that Paramartha is limited to Paranishapana, or absolute perfection. An example, in the exposition of these 2 truths out of 4, the former believe and maintain that on this plane, at any rate, there exists only Samvritasaya, or relative truth, and the latter teach the existence of Paramartha Satya, the absolute truth. And there is a footnote attached. Paramartha is self-consciousness in Sanskrit. Sva samadhinana, or the self-analyzing reflection, from two words, parama, above everything, and artha, comprehension. Satya, meaning absolute true being, or esi. In Tibetan, paramartha satya is dandam payadayanpa. The opposite of this absolute reality, or actuality, is samvrita satya, the relative truth only. Samvriti, meaning false conception, and being the origin of illusion, maya, in Tibetan, kansabchi denpa, illusion creating appearance. No arhat, O mendicants, can reach absolute knowledge before he becomes one with Parinirvana. Parikalpita and Paratantra are his two greatest enemies, aphorisms of the Bodhisattvas. Parikalpita, in Tibetan, Kung Tatag, is error, made by those unable to realize the emptiness and illusionary nature of all, who believe something to exist which does not, e.g., the non-ego. And Paratantra is that, whatever it is, which exists only through a dependent or casual connection, and which has to disappear as soon as the cause from which it proceeds is removed. An example, the light of a wick. Destroy or extinguish it, the light disappears. Esoteric philosophy teaches that everything lives and is conscious, but not that all life and consciousness are similar to those of human or even animal beings. Life we look upon as the one form of existence, manifesting in what is called matter, or, as in man, what, incorrectly separating them, we name spirit, soul, and matter. Matter is the vehicle for the manifestation of the soul on this plane of existence, the body, the 3D temple, or the 5D temple. The soul is the vehicle on a higher plane for the manifestation of spirit, the individualized piece of the divine that makes the decisions. And these three are a trinity synthesized by life, which pervades them all. The idea of universal life is one of those ancient conceptions which are returning to the human mind in this century as a consequence of its liberation from anthropomorphic theology. Science, it is true, contents itself with tracing or postulating the signs of universal life, and has not yet been bold enough to even whisper, anima mundi, the idea of crystalline life, now familiar to science, would have been scouted half a century ago. Botanists are now searching for the nerves of plants. Not that they suppose that plants can feel or think as animals do, but because they believe that some structure, bearing the same relation functionality to plant life that nerves bear to animal life, is necessary to explain vegetable growth and nutrition. It hardly seems possible that science can disguise from itself much longer, by the mere use of terms such as force and energy, the fact that things that have life are living beings, whether they be atoms or planets. But what is the belief of the inner esoteric schools? The reader may ask. What are the doctrines taught on this subject by the esoteric Buddhists? With them, alaya has double and even triple meaning. In the Yoga Kachara system of the contemplative Mahayana school, alaya is both the universal soul, anima mundi, and the self of a progressed adept. He who is strong in the yoga can introduce at his will alaya by means of meditation into the true nature of existence. Yes. Now, I don't know about yoga, right? To me, my understanding of yoga is both the physical exercise associated with the stretching manipulations and the energetic movements that are associated with them, right? When you are doing downward dog, you are moving the energy in your body, if you are doing it correctly, in specific ways. The same with each of the different poses. It is not merely just the movement of the body, but the energetic investment, which is part of the lesson that you learn in yoga. Now, I am not a yogic adept. That is my understanding of yoga. I could be wrong, and if I am, drop it in the comments. We will address that. But my understanding is that it is the movement of the energy, right? The investment of you with intentionality to move the energy as need be. And so, yes, I am at least an adept in moving the energy, right? I am at least an adept bordering upon mastery. Now, that's a little bit heady to self-declare, I understand. But I have some actual results from doing it, right? It is not merely a concept to me. It is not merely something that I have supposed. I literally healed myself. And so, I do believe that if that is what is being intimated here, is true, right? You can introduce at will your alaya by means of meditation into the true nature of existence, with the caveat that my definition of meditation and other people's definition of meditation are not exactly the same thing. To me, if you are taking an active part in any way, it is prayer, right? If you are asking for something, it is prayer. If you're contemplating on something, it is prayer. If you are moving the energies, it is prayer. Meditation is, to me, the removal of self and the allowance of the divine to influence. So, I begin my meditation with prayer. It is me expressing gratitude for all of the blessings in my life. It is me stating my goals, and then I go into a meditative state. That is me actively removing my thoughts from the sensations, right? So I am literally taking the thoughts and dismissing them. When something comes in, I let it flow away until there are no thoughts, at which point I am in a meditative state. I am not directing any thoughts. I am not directing any energies. Once I have achieved the meditative state, I stay there until such a time as I become aware once again of myself. That is when I move the energy, right? It is after the meditation. It is another period of prayer. I don't begin with moving the energy. I end with it. It is pray, set the intentionality, allow source to connect, dwell in source, and then move the energy for the desired effect. That, to me, is the meditative practice, but it is not meditation. Meditation is the elimination of self. Again, that is an important distinction for me. That is how it works for me. I assume that it will work for others, but there is, as of now, nobody else whom I am conversing with in this manner that is doing the same things. And so I could be wrong and it's just my way of doing things, or I could be right and other people just haven't keyed in yet, because this channel is open to everyone, but it is not for everyone. There are very few people who will get through these videos. There are very few people who will actually go and do the things that we talk about in these videos. So until the community is to such a point where I have the feedback, I'm going to assume that I am correct, with the caveat that I might not be. It is important, however, for me to point out the differentiation in definitions here. Much as I have done through this entire chapter, what I believe and what other people believe are not exactly the same, and I'm here to clarify the things which work for me. That is not to say that some other system cannot work for you. It is not to say that the things which have been revealed to me are even what should be revealed to you. That is a spiritual assumption that you take when you make the process, and it could be that you only get revealed the 3 chakras, right? There could be You only with the understanding of the above, the below, and the middle. That is a possibility. It could be 5 chakras. It could be 7. In my estimation, there are 8. I have a variety of reasons for believing that, but not the least of which is divine revelation through these meditative practices. And things that I have put into place. I do magic. It is something that I have healed myself with. It is the direct manipulation of the Holy Spirit through the will of God, right? I fully and firmly believe that without the will of God, that would not happen. But God doesn't even care if you're using it positively or negatively for the most part. Either way is still a lesson. All right, back to the alaya has an absolute eternal existence, says Arya Sangha, the rival of Nagarjuna. Let's see what that is. Arasaga was a pre-Christian adept and founder of a Buddhist esoteric school, though Kusama de Koros places him, for some reason of his own, in the 7th century. Footnote continued on the next page. AD. There was another Arasanga who lived during the 1st centuries of our era, and the Hungarian scholar most probably confuses the two. In one sense, it is pradhana, which is explained in Vishnu Purana as that which is the unevolved cause is emphatically called by the most eminent sages pradhana, original base, which is subtile prakriti, vis-a-vis that which is eternal and which at once is, or comprehends, what is and what is not, or is mere process. Prakriti, however, is an incorrect word, and Alaya would explain it better, for Prakriti is not the unrecognizable Brahma. Let's check out that footnote. The indiscrete cause, which is uniform and both cause and effect, and which those who are acquainted with the first principles call pradhana and prakriti, is the incognizable Brahma, who was before all Vayu Purana. In example, Brahma does not put forth evolution itself or create, but only exhibits various aspects of itself, one of which is prakriti, an aspect of pradhana. It is a mistake of those who know nothing of the universality of the occult doctrines from the very cradle of the human races, and especially so of those scholars who reject the very idea of a primordial revelation, to teach that the anima mundi, the one life or universal soul, was made known only by Anaxagoras during his age. This philosopher brought the teaching forward simply to oppose the two materialistic conceptions of cosmogony of Democritus, based on his exoteric theory of blindly driven atoms. Anaxagoras of Clazomene was not its inventor, but only its propagator, as also was Plato. That which he called the mundane intelligence, the nous, the principle that, according to his views, is absolutely separated and free from matter and acts on design, was called motion, the one life, or Jivatma, ages before the year 500 BC in India. All right, now we're going to check out the footnote, which is finite self-consciousness, For how can the Absolute attain it otherwise than as simply an aspect, the highest of which is known to us is human consciousness? Only the Aryan philosophers never endowed the principle, which with them is infinite, with the finite attribute of thinking. This leads the reader, naturally, to the supreme spirit of Hegel and the German transcendentalist as a contrast that it might be useful to point out. The schools of Schelling and Fichte have diverged widely from the primitive archaic conception of an absolute principle and have mirrored only an aspect of the basic idea of this Vedanta. Even the Absoluter Geist, shadowed forth by von Hartmann in his pessimistic philosophy of the unconscious, while it is, perhaps, the closest approximation made by European speculation to the Hindu Advaita doctrines, similarly falls far short of the reality. According to Hegel, the unconscious would never have undertaken the vast and laborious task of evolving the universe, except in the hope of attaining clear self-consciousness. In this connection, it is to be borne in mind that in designating spirit, which the European pantheists use as an equivalent to Parabrahm, as unconscious, they do not attach to that expression of spirit one employed in the absence of a better to symbolize a profound mystery, the connotation it usually bears. The absolute consciousness, they tell us, behind phenomena, which is only termed unconsciousness in the absence of any element of personality, transcends human conception. Man, unable to form one concept except in terms of empirical phenomena, is powerless from the very constitution of his being to raise the veil that shrouds the mystery of the absolute. Only the liberated spirit is able to faintly realize the nature of the source whence it sprung and whither it must eventually return. As the highest Dayan Kokan, however, can but bow in ignorance before the awful mystery of the absolute being, and since, even in that culmination of conscious existence, the merging of the individual in the universal consciousness, to use a phrase of Fichte, the finite cannot conceive of the infinite, nor can it apply to it its own standard of mental experiences. How can it be said that the unconscious and the absolute can have even an instinctive impulse or hope of attaining clear self-consciousness? Let's check out that footnote. See Schwegler's Handbook of the History of Philosophy in Sterling's translation. A Vedantin would never admit this Hegelian idea, and the occultist would say that it applies perfectly to the awakened Mahat, the universal mind already projecting into the phenomenal world as the first aspect of the changeless absolute, but never to the latter. Spirit and matter, or Purusha and Prakriti, are but two primeval aspects of the one and secondless, we are taught. The matter-moving nous, the animating soul, immanent in every atom, manifested in man, latent in the stone, has different degrees of power, and this pantheistic idea of a general spirit soul pervading all nature is the oldest of all the philosophical notions. Nor was the Archaeus a discovery of Paracelsus, nor of his pupil Van Helmont, for it is again the same Archaeus, or Father Ether, the manifested basis and source of the innumerable phenomena of life localized. The whole series of the numberless speculations of this kind are but variations on this theme, the keynote of which was struck in this primeval revelation. See Part 2, Primordial Substance. The term Anupadaka, parentless, or without progenitors, is a mystical designation having several meanings in the philosophy. By this name, celestial beings, the Dayan Kokans or Dhyani Buddhas, are generally meant. But as these correspond mystically to the human Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, known as the Manushi or human Buddhas, the latter are also designated Anupadaka, once that their whole personality is merged in their compound sixth and seventh principles, or Atma Buddhi, and that they have become the diamond-souled Vajrasattvas. Let's check out that footnote. Vajra, diamond holder. In Tibetan, Dajor de Simpa, meaning the soul, its adamantine quality referring to its indestructibility in the hereafter. The explanation with regard to the Anupadaka given in the Kala Chakra, the first in the Gayut division of the Kanjor, is half esoteric. It has misled the Orientalists into erroneous speculations with respect to the Dhyani Buddhas and their earthly correspondencies, the Manushi Buddhas. The real tenet is hinted at in a subsequent volume, see The Mystery About Buddha, and will be more fully explained in its proper place. Become the diamond-souled, the full Mahatmas. The concealed Lord, Sangbai Dakpo, the one merged with the Absolute, can have no parents, since he is self-existent and one with the Universal Spirit, Svayam Baihu. Let's check out that footnote. To quote Hegel again, who, with Schelling, practically accepted the pantheistic conception of periodical avatars, special incarnations of the world spirit in man, as seen in the case of all the great religious reformers. The essence of man is spirit. Only by stripping himself of his finiteness and surrendering himself to pure self-consciousness does he attain the truth. Christ-man, as man in whom the unity of God-man, identity of the individual with the universal universal consciousness, as taught by the Vedantins and some Advaitis, appeared, has, in his death and history generally, himself presented the eternal history of spirit, a history which every man has to accomplish in himself in order to exist as spirit. Philosophy of History, Sibrey's English translation, page 340. And one with the universal spirit, the Svabhavat is the highest aspect. The mystery and the hierarchy of the Anupadaka is great. Its apex being the universal spirit soul, and the lower rung, the Manushi Buddha. And even every soul-endowed man is Anupadaka in a latent state. Hence, when speaking of the universe in its formless, eternal, or absolute condition, before it was fashioned by the builders, the expression, the universe was Anupadaka. And that is going to bring us to the end of stanza 1. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult concepts. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I am here to reveal truth. That is literally one of the reasons why I exist, as far as I am aware. The separation of terminology to me is extremely important. It may not be to you, and if so, then this is not going to be the study for you. But if you made it this far, then you understand at least what I am talking about. I haven't pissed you off enough that you clicked away. My understanding is built upon practicality, right? I did not have all of this esoteric knowledge before I began the process. I had a small inkling of some things, but most of what I speak about is something that has been revealed to me through spiritual experience. That is going to be too much for some people. Not everybody is on the same path. We are not all aligned in the same way for the same timeline. It's really not a thing. In some people's timelines, tyranny took over in the 1930s, right? Now, us aligning with a timeline that is farther back in history like that is probably not going to happen. We are not going to veer our reality so far as to interfere with a reality that has not become on our plane. That can be a little bit much for some people, but the fluidity of manifestation rests in that. You cannot pull something from nothing. You have to be fundamentally, foundationally correct. In order to manifest something that you want, you have to first invest your energy in that particular outcome. You have to take steps in accordance with it and invest your intentionality into it. But what that does is change your timeline from the current path to the path where you possess the thing that you desire. Whether that be more discipline, whether it be material goods, you are not pulling it from nothing. You are aligning your path like steering a boat with a rudder. it can take a long time for that rudder to actually affect the change that you want. But if you steer too far, you go too far in the boat and you don't exactly wind up where you want. Small incremental steps with the understanding of the foundation can lead you to where you can guide your timeline to where you want it to be. The effects that I have changed in healing myself is because of the things that we have talked about here today, at least in part. I am hoping and I am hopeful after reading this that we will be able to explain in much greater detail the things that I am talking about. Nothing today is outside of foundation, right? Some of the things are speculative. Now, either from me or from her, I don't care if it has been written for 20,000 years and it is verified that for 20,000 years it has worked. If one piece of the key is wrong, that is a 1-degree separation between your final product and where you want that final product to be. The greater knowledge that you have, the better you are able to steer the boat, the better the response of the rudder. And so, what I am attempting to do here is clarify as much as possible the things that are underpinning this existence. You are here voluntarily. This is not a prison planet. You are not being punished here. You are here for the experience of being here. And sometimes that is pretty horrible. Most of the time it is not. Most of the time it is at least agreeable. Some of the time it is quite enjoyable. But some of the time it is going to absolutely fucking suck. You have to take that as well as the joy. You have to understand that every single bit of that is part of the direction of your timeline. And you can either learn from your lesson or you can repeat your lesson, but there is no other option. It is one or the other. You are either learning or you're not. You're either walking up the spiral of choice or you are walking down the spiral of choice. It really is that simple of a differentiation. You are either investing actively in the direction you want to go, or you are partaking inactively in the direction that you are being led. There is no differentiation. Well, that is the only differentiation. You are either active in it or you are not. If you are not, somebody else is directing it. It is that simple. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that I said today. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks, because the bills do not pay themselves. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.